somebody in the class tell me what a paper clip is used for?
To clip papers
To
together?
clip papers. John Dewey was afraid that throughout all of your years of schooling, you would only ever be taught that a paper clip was used to clip papers. When a paper clip can be used if you have a messy bun and it's starting to come down, you can stick it in your hair and it'll stay that way.
Thank
And
you for
James
that.
Bond.
I didn't even think about that.
See?
If I run out of bobby pins.
Perfect. And a paper clip, James Bond uses a paper clip to get out of handcuffs all the time. That's what he does. That's James Bond. And MacGyver, that's what they do. John Dewey felt that the best way for a student to learn is through practice and experimentation. And that's what we're here to tell you about today.
My name is Erica Jackson. I'll be telling you a little bit about John Dewey. Macon-Dewey in 1953 wrote, John Dewey has been to our age what Aristotle has been to the later Middle Ages. Not a philosopher, but the philosopher. On October 20th, 1859, John Dewey was born in Burlington, Vermont. John Dewey also attended Burlington Public Schools. At the age of 15, John Dewey enrolled in the University of Vermont and studied philosophy. John Dewey later received his doctorate from Johns Hopkins and got hired at the University of Michigan. John Dewey believed that education was best taught through learning. Therefore, he taught through experiments. John Dewey and his wife opened an experimental school based on experiments called the University Elementary School. John Dewey was also a published author who was the head of the philosophy department at the University of Chicago, where in 1930 he decided to retire from teaching.
Okay, so good morning. My name is Jessica, and today I'm going to do an activity with you that compares two different styles of activities that are used in classrooms. And your handout that you have does follow along with our presentation. So if you want to make notes or something, feel free to use this as well. We're going to pretend that we are in a kindergarten classroom, and we're going to be divided into two groups. Group A is going to do an activity that relates to John Dewey's idea that education should be based on the principle of learning through doing. And Group B is going to do an activity where they identify and recognize shapes through worksheets. Both of these activities comply with a few of the Common Core Georgia performance standards. Unfortunately, because we do not have a lot of time, I couldn't do the entire unit, but I did include this page for you, so if you would like to look at it, you can. It's the Kindergarten Unit 1 Sophisticated Shapes. So in our classroom, we're going, like I said, we're going to be doing an activity with Group A, who's going to make predictions. And then they're going to create their shape, and they're going to compare the shape that they make to their predictions. They're also going to be asked to give real-world examples. Group B is going to match, color, and draw shapes to use their identification. This is something else that I included. It's where I got my information for the guided questions, an introduction, and also my learning objectives. So you can just Google the website there and look at the lesson plan in its entirety. So in our kindergarten classroom, we have already started learning about shapes. We've done so by reading a few books. These are examples of books that we probably have read. We've also discussed our guided questions. What are basic shapes and where can they be found? Before we start our activity, these are our learning objectives. So while you're doing your activity, I would like for you to keep these learning objectives in mind and figure out or relate to whether or not you think a kindergarten class would be able to achieve these learning objectives through the activity that you do. Identify specific shapes, recognize these shapes in the real world, and create original works of art using the shapes. Okay? On your handout, it'll say an A or a B. If you're A, will you please raise your hand so we can give you material. When you get your material, you can turn to page 6, and you may begin. Start at the top, and you work your way down to the bottom. If you are in group B, you can turn to page 7 and you may get started as well. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask us. We are on a time frame, so I will ask you to stop in a few minutes so that we can move on.
I am a steak with 3 sides and 3 vegetables.
I know they have this.
I'll let you run clockwise one.
The draw two sides.
What about, you know those sport flags where it's like, just the, those are the flags, the golf flag, golfing. Oh, golfing tee. So like flags in general, because sports flags have that too. But where's the, just the single team? Golf, oh, the ball thing, okay. Ball holder? Yeah. Pool. So creative.
Is it fun?
Yeah. It's nice to have easy questions for once. I know, me too. Well, y'all made a circle, I made a worm. It's not a shape. Oh. You got an animal shape? Yeah, you
We're going to get about 30 more seconds.
Uh-uh.
All right, a minute, 30 more seconds.
See, I was right. It was time. You said I was wrong.
Oh, a circle, I'm gonna make a square. Just what I can.
Maybe a little too.
Well, it said,
I mean,
what,
without it,
oh, what do you believe I
be
can
like
make? I think I can make a square.
I'm like,
Do you think I can make a square?
So you would be the smarty pants kindergarten.
She should be the,
All right.
yeah. I'm that
She'd be
one.
at the table all by herself.
Yeah.
I would have
You
to
would have back
check
corner?
Yes.
Here, how about a rectangle?
I have to reword all kinds of
oh,
things.
it's a
I
flag.
misunderstood.
There we go.
Do it as a kindergarten.
Oh, you're smart. Okay. 4 times.
No, I thought she said do it and think about, and she told us to think about.
All right, we got 30
All right,
seconds.
about 30 more seconds, guys.
Hurry.
I'm going. It's a long, it's a long head. I know.
I did it like as a grown.
15
Four
seconds.
squares. Okay. Oh, shape with 0 sides and 0 ends. I didn't do that.
All right, let's rein things back in right now. Please give your attention to Jesseca.
Everybody done?
Yes.
Did you get most of the way through?
We're done.
All right, so as Jordan said, if we could bring our attention back up here, we are on a time frame, unfortunately. This really could have gone on forever. It really could have been a lot of fun. So let's review our learning objectives really quickly again. Identify specific shapes. Recognize these shapes in the real world. And also be able to create original works of art using these shapes. So in reference to the learning objectives and relating to a kindergarten class, which group activity do you feel covered the learning objectives best? Anybody want to give me an example of why?
Because we actually had to put it together.
Yeah, you actually had to do all three, right? You had to be able to identify the shapes. You also had to be able to create the shape and also recognize them in the real world. With the worksheets, you very easily could have included a worksheet that asked something about the real world, but I'm trying to make a point, so we're going to go with the worksheets that you had. Which group activity do you feel had more fun? A? Right, because they were able to be creative. They were able to actually do something with the lesson instead of just having to sit there and draw lines or shade or color. This one's a little tricky. So, which group activity do you feel applied more knowledge about shapes? So think about the applying more knowledge.
Because they actually had to come up with something in their head, and we could play with it.
You think? You think it's reversed?
No.
Well, with the worksheets, I'm going to borrow yours for a second. With the worksheets, you're given the shape, right?
Oh.
The very first thing that Group A had to do is make a prediction. In order to make a prediction, you have to be able to know a little bit about shapes, right? So with these, they are they had 4 different kinds. Whichever one that they had, the shape was somewhere on there. So this doesn't really ask you to do a whole lot of bringing back your knowledge, but making a prediction, it actually requires you to think. Using real world examples also gets you to think about where you've seen these shapes, how you've seen them. So I'm going to go with Group A. Does anybody else have a different opinion other than this one?
Sydney, this one.
No, this group.
No, that was just
Okay.
It was just
Which group activity do you feel could be altered to include multiple standards? Anybody? They both could, yes. I'm going to go back to Group A because, again, you can alter this one to do anything. You can reach any student's learning level. You can make it more difficult for those students that are a little more advanced. You can make, that one's dropped. You can make it less difficult for those that need a little more help, right? You answered that, didn't you? And as far as standards go, you can include multiple key terms or you can include multiple concepts, right, instead of just 1 or 2. So again, I'm going to go with Group A. I do want to point out that I'm not picking on worksheets. Worksheets can be very effective when they're used appropriately. I'm relating to what John Dewey said about that education should be based on the principle of learning through doing. Worksheets alone, they're not requiring them to do much doing, so they're not as effective. If you include the worksheet with something else that you're doing, they can very much be effective because they are an easier way for students to see the different types of shapes and be able to identify them. I want to thank you for your participation, and I hope that this activity will help you connect Katie's presentation of John Dewey's ideas and theories to a real-life classroom so that you can see just how important he was to education and still continues to be today.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Katie, and I'm going to tell you more in depth about John Dewey's different theories and ideas on education. This is about his purpose of education. John Dewey felt that the purpose of education should not be revolved around acquisition of a predetermined set of skills, but rather the realization of one's full potential and the ability to use those skills for the greater good. And one of Dewey's most important ideas, as you can see from Group A, was that he wanted students to be involved, hands-on in work. He felt that it helped strengthen their minds and that it would also help them be involved in the classroom and to help socialize among students, which he felt that greatly encouraged the students to learn more information. As we said, he emphasized the importance of learner participation in order to help one maintain and better their learning abilities and to strengthen the minds of young learners. And then Dewey continually argued that education and learning are social and interactive processes. As you can see, the students here are working together, reading a book and learning. He felt that school was a social institution, that socializing in the classroom and hands-on work helped the students grow mentally and help them be able to socialize better, which would help them, later on in life if they wanted to try and get a job or if they were doing what we're doing now, standing up here talking in front of other people. If you were to pull a student aside that never had socialized with other people and made them do something like that, they would have no idea what to do while they were up here. So he felt that the importance of education was not only of going to school and it was a place to gain content knowledge and to also learn how one should live. He felt that you could learn a lot of morals of life at school, that it taught you how to behave and what was acceptable in society. And then if a student is taught something that interests them, then they are much more likely to retain the information and want to gain more knowledge on the subject. Group A got to play with the pipe cleaners and got to make different shapes and stuff like that. And as we answered before, Group A had more fun than Group B, who just had to do the worksheet and write stuff out. If you are able to pique the interest of a student and do something that they enjoy or that is fun, then they're much more likely to want to learn about the information and to retain it. They can go home and tell their friends about it or tell their parents what they learned today, and even to be excited about education. And then in order for education to be most effective, content must be presented in a way that allows the students to relate the information to prior experiences in their life, and this deepens the connections with their new knowledge. If you are able to tell a child something that relates to their home life, then they know what you're talking about and they can connect it to what they're learning now. Dewey also believe that students thrive in an environment where they are allowed to experience and interact with the curriculum, as you can see from Group A's work when they were doing hands-on and working together with the pipe cleaners. Excuse me. And all the students should have the opportunity to take part in their own learning. Students always have different learning patterns, as we've learned from Ms. Sarton, that everyone learns differently and that you need to allow them to interact with the curriculum. And you need to know your students and how they learn best to help them gain their education as they should. And do we believe that there was an educational structure that strikes a balance between delivering knowledge while also taking into the account the interests and the experiences of the student? That is all.
Alright, my name is Taylor Minton, and we're going to be doing an interactive assessment, kind of like the quiz bowl. Okay. Oh wait, first, I'm going to divide this group into two. For Morgan and Mary Jo, y'all will be one group, and Alex, to you will be group 2, group 3, group 4, and group 5. When I call your number, number off, like we do usually, and when I call your number, please stand up and remain standing. Okay. Group 2, person 4.
So we're supposed to number.
Yeah,
Your number heads.
Number
Right.
You're group 2.
And we're group 3.
Group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5.
Group 3, and I'm number 1.
Alright, are y'all ready? Alright, group 1, person 2. That's you. Alright, one more. Group 5, person 1.
That person's supposed to stand.
Yes, stand and remain standing. Alright, I'm going to ask you a question. And if you get it wrong, sit down, and if you get it right, remain standing. Alright, true or false? John Dewey believed that students should learn by repetition, not by learner participation. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. If you don't need. She raised hers. Erica. Yes! Yes, you sit down. You remain standing. Okay? Alright. I'm going to call another person. Group. Nope, there's no fourth person. Sorry. Group 2, person 4. Was there a fourth person? You? Okay. Alright, the question is, what state was Dewey born in? Erica? Good job.
She's racking up.
Alright, you remain standing. Group 3, person 4.
No, sorry.
No, you guys are 4. Yeah, you're group 4.
The question is, according to Dewey, if a student is taught something that interests them, will they be more likely or less likely to retain that information? What was it?
Oh, they're more likely.
Correct. Good. Alright. Group 4, person 5. That's me. Alright, the question is,
true or false? Do we believe that the purpose of education should not revolve around the acquisition of a predetermined set of skills?
Casey.
She was fast.
False.
No.
Did not.
Oh, yes, you are correct. I'm sorry. You're Yes.
Yeah, okay.
All right, this is the last question. This is a hard one. Group person, group 1, person 3. Okay. Question. In order for education to be blank, content must be presented in a way that allows the student to relate the information to prior experiences. Yes.
All right, who was, before we ask any questions, I know who stood up and did not win?
You get a candy.
I sat down and
That's all right, nobody else stood up that did not win? All right,
Yes, I'm just going to go over the main points of the presentation. John Dewey emphasized the importance of learner participation by doing. The purpose of education should not revolve around the acquisition of a predetermined set of skills, but rather the realization of one's full potential and the ability to use those skills for the greater good. In order for education to be most effective, Casey, content must be presented in a way that allows the student to relate the information to prior experiences, thus deepening the connection with this new knowledge. Dewey continually argued that education and learning are social and interactive processes. Dewey makes a strong case for the importance of education not only as a place to gain content knowledge, but also to learn how one should live.
all right, we have a foul playing.
You did say, what'd you say?
All right, so the
answer's true. I'm just saying.
round 4 question was
Taylor
true or
knew
false.
it too. But she
Do we believe that, we'll let the
You
class
did
decide.
intimidate me.
Do we believe that the purpose of education should not revolve around the acquisition of a predetermined set of skills? Will you read to us what it says up there, please?
The purpose of education should not
Oh, well,
revolve.
Wait, did she say
true
Dewey
the first
believed in
time
the
I
question?
Oh, no, she said false.
She said false and Taylor said it was true.
Oh, I
And
thought
then
it
she
was.
intimidated me.
But it was,
It
you were
actually
the one
didn't say
standing up there,
Dewey
right? I think.
So
She
Dewey
was going
got
against you.
No, Dewey.
Well, we apologize.
Sorry, guys.
Thank you. We'll
She
get
still got candy even saying that, so I don't feel bad.
No. We do. Thank you for keeping us honest. Anybody have any questions?
I told you.
All right, well, thank you guys for paying attention to us, and we hope you enjoy it.
While group 2 is coming, again, I want to thank group 2. I think they had a very engaging presentation.